For almost 80 years, a heavy concrete door under Berlin stayed sealed. Behind it lay the last shelter of Adolf Hitler, the place where the war, his regime, and his life all came to an end. For decades, no one was allowed to enter. The walls were buried under rubble, the location hidden from every map. What makes this place so haunting is not its size or design. It's what happened there in the final days of 1945, when a collapsing empire tried to survive a few more weeks underground. This bunker, once meant to protect the most powerful man in Europe, became a tomb for his dream of control. When the doors finally opened again, historians and engineers found something unexpected. The rooms were small, almost claustrophobic. The ceilings were low, rusted pipes ran across cracked concrete. Nothing looked like the grand headquarters once described in propaganda films. Instead, it was simple and functional, a shelter built for fear, not for glory. But the mystery of the bunker was never only about walls and steel. It was about the silence that followed. After 1945, the Soviet army sealed the site completely. The new authorities covered it with debris and concrete, erasing it from the surface of the city. For decades, the world argued about what had happened down there. Had Hitler really died inside? Were there survivors? Was the whole story hidden to protect someone? These questions turned the bunker into more than a ruin. It became a legend. Books, rumors, and conspiracy theories filled the gap that history had left open. The idea of a hidden underground world, frozen in time, fascinated generations. Yet the real story of the bunker isn't about mystery for its own sake. It's about how power ends, quietly, far from the noise it once created. It's about people trapped in their own walls, watching the world above collapse. When we picture the bunker now, it's easy to imagine the darkness, the thick air, the endless hum of machines. But the truth is even more uncomfortable. This place was not a monument to power. It was a reminder that every system built on fear eventually hides from its own reflection. To understand what lies beneath, we need to go back to the moment when the world above started to fall apart, when Berlin was burning and its leader chose to live under the ground. In January 1945, Berlin was collapsing. Buildings were crushed, bridges gone, streets filled with rubble. The cold was brutal, and people searched for food in the ruins. Bombs fell every night, shaking what was left of the city. On January 16th, Adolf Hitler left the surface and moved into the bunker built under the Reich Chancellery. It was a maze of concrete rooms buried deep underground, made to survive even the heaviest bombing. That step marked the beginning of his isolation. From that day on, he would rule a dying empire from beneath the ground. The bunker wasn't large or luxurious. It had low ceilings, narrow corridors, and steel doors that sealed shut. There were no windows, only the constant hum of fans pumping air through filters. Generators kept the lights on, but power often failed. The smell of oil and damp concrete filled every room. Inside, Hitler surrounded himself with a small circle of people, secretaries, guards, and close advisors. Eva Braun joined him soon after. Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister, moved in with his wife Magda and their 6 children. There were also doctors, officers, and a few loyal aides. Together they lived like ghosts, sealed away from the world they had destroyed. Every morning, Hitler demanded reports from the front. Generals arrived with bad news. The Red Army had crossed the Oder River. American forces were moving in from the west. Each day, the map on the wall grew smaller. Still, he spoke of counterattacks that no longer existed and armies that had already been wiped out. By April, even the most loyal officers could see the truth. The city was surrounded, supplies were gone, and soldiers were fighting street by street. Yet Hitler refused to leave. He said he would stay in Berlin and die there if necessary. Life inside the bunker became a strange routine. People ate canned food, drank weak coffee, and worked under artificial light. There was no day or night, only the constant sound of explosions above. When the air vents failed, the rooms filled with the smell of smoke. Some people cried quietly, others stared at the walls for hours. By mid-April, fear replaced discipline. Arguments broke out. Hitler shouted at his generals and blamed them for defeats that couldn't be stopped. His hands trembled, his voice broke. He still believed that a miracle might save him, but everyone else knew the war was lost. Outside, Soviet troops closed in from every direction. Inside, the air grew thicker, the silence heavier. The once powerful leader was now trapped in the very shelter he had built for safety. The city above was dying, and below it, in the bunker, the last days of the Third Reich had already begun. By the last week of April 1945, Berlin was gone. The streets were no longer streets but piles of stone and twisted metal. Soviet tanks rolled over what was left of the city center. Artillery shells landed every few minutes, shaking the ground above the bunker like an endless storm. Inside, people moved quietly through dim hallways. The air was thick and smelled of oil and smoke. Hitler still held briefings, but they no longer meant anything. He shouted about divisions that didn't exist and counterattacks that no one could launch. The men standing around the map table nodded in silence. They all knew the truth. On April 28th, new reports reached the bunker. Heinrich Himmler, one of Hitler's oldest allies, had tried to make peace with the Western Allies. It was betrayal from the inside, and it crushed what little hope Hitler had left. That same day, he heard that Mussolini had been captured and killed in Italy. His body had been hung in public. Hitler swore he would never let that happen to him. That night, he dictated two documents, a political will and a personal one. In the first, he blamed the Jews for Germany's defeat and appointed Admiral Karl Dönitz to take over. In the second, he recognized his relationship with Eva Braun and announced that they would marry. His secretary typed every word as the walls shook from the shelling above. In the early hours of April 29th, Hitler and Eva Braun were married in a short ceremony inside the bunker. There were only a few witnesses. The official who led the ceremony was nervous, his hands shaking as he read the words. Afterward, the couple shared a simple meal of cake and champagne. There was no music, no celebration, only the faint sound of explosions overhead. The next day, April 30th, the war around them was nearly over. Soviet troops were only a few hundred yards away. Hitler met with his aides one last time, thanked them, and told them the war was lost. Then he and Eva went into his private room. A few minutes later, a single gunshot echoed through the corridor. When the aides entered, they found Hitler dead on the sofa with a wound to his temple. Eva Braun was beside him, dead from poison. Following his wishes, the aides wrapped both bodies in blankets, carried them up the narrow stairs, and laid them in a bomb crater outside. They poured gasoline over them and set them on fire. The flames didn't last long. There wasn't enough fuel. The fire flickered and went out as the bombing continued. By nightfall, what was left of the bodies was buried under debris. That night, Joseph Goebbels and his wife killed their 6 children before taking their own lives. Others tried to escape through tunnels and streets filled with rubble, but few made it out alive. In the end, the bunker was silent. The empire that once stretched across Europe ended in a small concrete room beneath a burning city. When the fighting finally stopped in Berlin, the city was nothing but ruins. Soviet soldiers searched through the wreckage of the Reich Chancellery and found the entrance to the underground bunker. Inside, everything smelled of smoke and damp concrete. Furniture was broken, walls were cracked, and pools of water covered the floor. The air was still and heavy. In a crater near the bunker exit, soldiers found burned remains. They collected bone fragments, pieces of skull, and metal from dental work. Soviet intelligence quickly took control of the site. The Smersh unit, the military counterintelligence service, began a secret investigation. Every piece of evidence was packed in boxes and sent to Moscow. Among the most important clues were teeth and jaw fragments. Soviet doctors compared them with dental records taken from Hitler's personal dentist, Hugo Blaschke. Later, his assistant, Käthe Häusermann, confirmed the match. The teeth were unique, gold bridges and specific fillings that could only belong to one person. The conclusion was clear: Hitler was dead. But Stalin made a different decision. Instead of announcing the truth, he ordered that the results remain secret. To the world, Soviet officials said they weren't sure whether Hitler had really died. In private, they knew the evidence was solid, but in public, they fueled doubt. This confusion gave birth to rumors. Some newspapers claimed Hitler had escaped to Argentina. Others said he was hiding in Spain or even in a monastery in Tibet. For years, people reported sightings that were never proven. The mystery became part of post-war propaganda. The Soviets buried the remains in Magdeburg, then moved them several times to keep them hidden. In 1970, fearing the site could become a shrine for neo-Nazis, they dug up what was left, burned it completely, and scattered the ashes into a river. Only the jaw and a piece of skull were kept in secret archives in Moscow. For decades, no one outside the Soviet Union was allowed to see them. Western historians questioned whether the remains were real. The lack of transparency gave conspiracy theories new life. Books and documentaries claimed Hitler had survived and escaped through rat lines, the secret Nazi escape routes to South America. After the Soviet Union collapsed, Russian officials allowed a few scientists to examine the remains. In 2000, French researchers confirmed that the teeth matched Hitler's medical records exactly. Later DNA tests showed the skull fragment belonged to a woman, probably not Hitler's, but the jaw and dental work left no doubt. Still, the myth of his escape refused to die. People preferred mystery over evidence. For some, it was easier to believe the monster was still out there than to face the truth, that everything had ended in a dark bunker under a ruined city. For almost 80 years, the place where Hitler spent his final days stayed buried under concrete and silence. The Soviet Union had sealed the site, and East Germany later built apartment blocks above it. On the maps of Berlin, the area was marked as ordinary housing. For decades, no one was allowed to dig, study, or even talk about what lay below. After Germany's reunification in 1990, historians pushed to find the truth. But the government stayed cautious. They feared the bunker could become a meeting point for extremists or a symbol for hate. So the site remained closed, invisible, but not forgotten. Locals knew what was underneath, and some construction workers whispered stories of sealed rooms and strange echoes from the ground. Then, in 2024, everything changed. After long negotiations, German authorities and an international research team agreed to a limited scientific exploration. The goal wasn't to turn it into a museum, but to document it before it was lost forever. Engineers used ground radar and old aerial photos to locate the buried structure. They finally found a collapsed air shaft hidden under a sidewalk in central Berlin. Before anyone went down, they sent small drones equipped with lights, cameras, and air sensors. The footage showed dark corridors filled with stagnant water, broken furniture, and rusted metal. The air was toxic, full of mold and gases from decades of decay. The walls were cracked, but parts of the structure were still standing. When the team finally entered wearing protective suits, they found the bunker almost exactly as it had been left in 1945. Narrow hallways led to rooms filled with corroded beds, shattered dishes, and pieces of military equipment. In one room, a map of Berlin clung to the wall, its paper faded but still showing faint red lines, the last battle plans of the war. The scientists discovered burned furniture and fragments of documents, some with handwriting barely visible. Forensic tests found traces of human blood and cyanide on a metal frame believed to be part of Hitler's sofa. In another chamber, they found rusted cabinets containing radio parts and coded messages from the last days of April 1945. Every object was carefully photographed and preserved. The most chilling discovery was a small child's toy, a stuffed rabbit, thought to belong to one of Goebbels' children. It was fragile, stained, and falling apart, but it made the story suddenly human again. The 2024 expedition didn't uncover hidden treasures or secret tunnels. What it revealed was silence, the frozen remains of a moment when an empire ended underground. The walls, the papers, the rust, all of it told the same story. Power built on fear always collapses. Today, the site remains closed to the public. A simple plaque nearby explains what happened there. People walk past it on their way to work, unaware that beneath their feet lies one of history's darkest rooms, a place where a regime crumbled and the war that changed the world finally came to an end.